Sorry, that had to be done. Oh well. Proceed. Let's go. Boo. Right. I began my babysitting career when I was desperate for money. I was in my mid teens because the boy I was really in love with, he smoked a lot of pot. And therefore, I too had to smoke a lot of pot. Obviously, teenage logic, but don't get me wrong though, I didn't smoke around any kids. In fact, I rather loved my job, mostly because I essentially got a free house every night that I had to work, once the kids were asleep anyway. I feel now, though, it's time to talk about my last shift, before I hung up my babysitting hat for good. I was 17, and by then I had looking after kids down into an art form. I had four regular families who I worked with, two of which were family friends, so I had a pretty sweet situation going on. I advertised through the local convenience store, and because my town was really small, and this was the early 90s, and nobody was on Craigslist, that's how it worked. Early on a summer's night, the house phone rang, and my mother called up to me saying, "Pick up the phone." I assumed it was my latest flame, assuring myself that it was eternal love. It never is, but hey, we dreamed, did we not? My demeanour shifted immediately when, instead of Zach Morrison's sultry tones, I was confronted with a rather well spoken, spoken, a rather well spoken older woman. She explained that there had been a family emergency and she desperately needed a sitter. And usually she'd wish to meet me up with me first, which was, it was nice of her. The fear in her voice made me immediately agree. I couldn't imagine what was going through her head, and I had absolutely no intention of running her up further. So, I arrived at her home at about 8 p.m. She told me the children were upstairs, and if anything happened, to ring the hospital and ask for Dr. Lynn. Again, this was the 1990s when cell phones were the size of caravans. She explained she was a resident at the hospital, and it was a tragic accident that she was now rushing to her work for family reasons. We have two kids, Gemma and Ryan. If either wake up, just tell them I went to see Grandma. My ex-husband lives 2 streets over, if you're really, really stuck. With that, I let her run, and then I grabbed my supplies from the kitchen. This house was absolutely mad. It was incredible. Even though she was a single mother, there was everything any kid could possibly need, including a Sega Mega Drive and a Super Nintendo. Lucky bastards. I settled down in front of the TV and opened one of the cans of Coke that was sitting on the table. This was going to be the easiest $50 I ever made. Then I heard a creak of the stairs and someone dash into the kitchen, which caused me to groan and say, "You're not as quick as you think." Well, at least that's what I remember saying. All kids are alike. Once they know that they have been caught, or once they know that other people know that they are there, they don't continue hiding for very long. A pale, young boy poked his head around the kitchen door. He looked a lot like his mother, right down to his brown eyes, fixed on me. Hi there, I'm Riley, I said, introducing myself as if I was trying to lure a deer out of the grass and then put it down. The boy narrowed his eyes for just a moment before coming closer. You shouldn't be here. When he spoke, I shuddered. Every horror movie cliche ran through my mind when I simply smiled. What are you doing out of bed? Is what I asked. I can't sleep. Gemma is in my bed, he continued. He continued to glare at me, and I shook my head. No one likes a tattletale, I said with a quick wink in his direction. The boy just glared at me again, as if I'd just insulted his very existence. I still felt so uncomfortable in his presence. He sat with me for half an hour while we watched some probably not appropriate television, but I felt sorry for him. He spoke very little and just stared at me. Every time I look over, I would catch his eye, and unlike a normal human being, he wouldn't look away, he just stared. Finally, I put my foot down and demanded that he return to bed. And if Gemma won't move, then I'd come up and move her. Without hesitation, the boy got upstairs, and as he reached the top of the step, I entered the kitchen to tidy up the dishes that I used for my snacks. Their fridge was covered in pictures and notes, mostly family vacations and test scores. Though one thing rattled me. In all of the pictures of the family, there were 3 children. I distinctly remember the 2 I was told of, Gemma and Ryan. Gemma had been in Ryan's bed, and the man himself had been bothering me. So who was the 3rd kid? Many of the pictures featured only Gemma and Ryan, but many later ones seemed to show a new baby. I began to get sad. I hope the baby didn't die, was my first thought. Then I realised that she mentioned her ex-husband. Clearly the child was with his father. Some sort of divorce dispute, perhaps. It was approaching midnight, and I peeked out the window to see Dr. Lim's car swing into the driveway. I did what I always do at the end of the night. I dashed upstairs to pretend I was checking in on her little monsters. As I pushed the bedroom door open slowly, I noticed Gemma in the bed. She was quite a pretty 7-year-old girl, again exactly like her mother. I couldn't see Ryan as I heard the front door open and footsteps on the stairs. Ryan? I called into the dark. The only reply I got was a coo from a nearby crib. A small toddler sitting upright and staring at me. A laugh came from behind me, and I nearly screamed as I came face to face with my employer. He never sleeps without me tucking him in. She carefully laid the child on his back and kissed his forehead, leading me to the door. I was utterly flabbergasted. I thought you only had 2 children, I asked, clearly miffed about understanding in the situation. Clearly miffed, but understanding in the situation. She paused at the door and then raised her eyebrows. I do, Gemma and Ryan. Oh, I just saw pictures on the fridge. I tried to finish. but I saw the look in her eyes, the same brown eyes the boy had, a deep sadness and confusion. I had an older son, John, but he passed away, unfortunately. The words caught in her throat as my senses went into overdrive. I nearly forgot about my payment before dashing home. The whole time I was running my mind, and it was racing and trying to digest what had happened. I didn't go back to babysitting after that night. I didn't tell anyone why. And I always avoided Dr. Lynn in town. If Ryan was the toddler in the pictures, John had been sitting beside me. I know he was. I doubted my sanity a lot that night. I almost forgot about it until, well, today. The only reason I'm sharing this is because I have children of my own now. And yesterday my daughter told me about her imaginary friend with big brown eyes, John.